Grace Reynolds, 32, lived in Chicago with her husband, Dr. Ethan Mitchell, a dedicated trauma surgeon. Despite her busy life, there was one constant that never changed her bond with her younger brother, Ryan. Growing up, they were inseparable, sharing snacks, fighting over the TV remote, teaming up against their parents when needed. Time had passed, life had shifted, but their connection held strong through distance and adulthood. So when Ryan called to say he was getting married and holding a small destination wedding in Sonoma County, California, Grace didn't hesitate. Sonoma was idyllic rolling vineyards, golden light, and a kind of tranquility that whispered new beginnings. Grace didn't know much about the bride, Sloane Whitaker. They'd met only twice, once briefly at Christmas and again at the engagement party. Both times Sloane had been pleasant, polished, and just a touch elusive. Still, Ryan was smitten, and Grace trusted his heart. They arrived in Sonoma on a Thursday afternoon 2 days before the ceremony. A luxury estate nestled in the hills had been rented for close family and the wedding party. As their SUV pulled into the gravel driveway, Grace spotted her parents Richard and Margaret chatting animatedly with Ryan on the front steps. Her father's arms flailed with excitement while her mother's silver-streaked hair shimmered in the sunlight. "There's my favorite sister," Ryan shouted, bounding down the stairs and sweeping Grace into a bear hug. He greeted Ethan with a warm handshake that melted into a quick back-patting hug. "You'll meet Sloane tonight. She's off getting her hair done with the bridesmaids. You'll love her." Grace smiled as Ryan helped with the luggage. The estate was breathtaking, terraced gardens, views of the nearby mountains, and a stillness that felt like something out of a painting. It was the kind of place where people whispered even when they didn't need to. Their room was on the second floor overlooking the vineyards. Ethan collapsed onto the bed, stretching out like he hadn't slept in days. "This mattress probably costs more than our first apartment," he muttered. Grace laughed. "Sloane's parents are footing most of the bill. Her dad apparently owns a huge portfolio in Monterey." That evening, the welcome dinner was held under twinkling lights strung between olive trees. Tables were arranged in a wide U shape. Classical jazz played in the background. And then came Sloane, gliding into the courtyard in a simple white cocktail dress, her blonde waves catching the golden glow. "Grace!" she called, arms outstretched. "Ryan says you're his person. I'm so excited to get to know you." There was something practiced in her cheer, almost rehearsed. But Grace chalked it up to wedding stress. Sloane introduced herself to Ethan with ease, complimenting his recent appointment at Chicago Memorial. She seemed to know details Grace hadn't expected, like how Ethan had made attending physician recently. "Ryan tells me you're brilliant," Sloane said with a charming, effortless smile. As the night went on, Sloane moved from table to table, engaging each guest like a polished host. With Grace's father, she asked intelligent questions about his investment firm, drawing him into conversation after conversation. She was poised, elegant, exactly what you'd want in a daughter-in-law. And yet later that night, as Grace lay in bed beside Ethan, something nudged at her, a quiet thought, a whisper of unease. Everything seemed perfect, maybe too perfect. The morning sunlight danced across the stone terrace as guests sipped their mimosas and nibbled on fresh fruit. Grace and Ethan arrived a little late to the champagne breakfast, only to find Sloane already seated, glowing in a white sundress, perfectly coiffed and cheery, like she hadn't hosted a rehearsal dinner the night before. "Good morning, you two," Sloane greeted, raising her glass. "I had the chef make us something extra special today. You're going to love it." She was radiant, effortless, but something about her seemed rehearsed. Grace smiled and made her way to the table, catching a glimpse of Sloane's phone, a navy blue iPhone case. Nothing unusual, at least not until an hour later. While walking back inside to grab her sweater, Grace heard a voice from down the hallway. It was Sloane, speaking in a tone Grace hadn't heard before. "We can't afford any mistakes. Everything needs to be ready by Sunday. The accounts should be accessible by then. The words hit like ice water. Her tone was clipped cold, businesslike. When Sloane spotted Grace, her demeanor flipped instantly. A sweet smile, a gentle tone. "Oh, the wedding planner again," she said with a dramatic eye roll. "He's freaking out over flowers." Grace smiled back automatically, but her mind was racing. That phone in her hand? Red case. Wait, wasn't her phone blue earlier? It could have been a second phone. Personal and work. Sure, plenty of people did that, but wasn't their planner named Jeffrey and definitely a guy? Grace didn't bring it up to Ethan immediately, but that afternoon as the bridesmaids gathered for dress fittings, she started noticing things. Sloane was charming, too charming. Each comment felt like a command wrapped in cotton candy. "Alyssa, honey, this hairstyle is so much better than your first pick. Thank God we changed it." "Oh, Jenna, that neckline does wonders for your shoulders. We should definitely go with this cut instead." None of the bridesmaids objected. They just nodded, smiled, some forced. Sloane's suggestions weren't suggestions. They were directions. During a break, Grace chatted casually with Chloe Whitaker, the so-called cousin and maid of honor. "So when did Sloane finish her MBA at Stanford?" Grace asked lightly. Chloe blinked. "Stanford? I thought it was UCLA." She quickly backtracked. "Maybe I'm mixing her up with someone else. So many cousins in the family, you know." Grace just nodded, but her gut churned. That night at the bridesmaids' dinner, Sloane was all smiles, but she stepped away for 3 phone calls. Each time she returned, she looked more strained, more tightly wound. As Grace left the restaurant, she found Ethan waiting in the lobby. "You're back early," she said. "Groomsmen dinner wrapped up," he replied. "Ryan's good, but..." "But what?" Ethan hesitated. "Some stories aren't lining up. Like, well, Ryan said he met Sloane at a charity auction. Outbid her for a trip to Maui. But her friend at dinner said they met when she spilled coffee on him at a cafe." Grace frowned. Maybe different memories of the same day. Maybe, but it feels off. He didn't need to say more. Grace felt it too. The cracks were small, but they were starting to show. The morning before the wedding, Grace woke earlier than usual. A layer of fog still hovered over the vineyards, and the estate was quiet, peaceful, too peaceful. Ethan lay beside her, scrolling his phone, though his eyes weren't really reading. He was watching, sensing, just like she was. "Do you feel it too?" Grace whispered, almost as if the walls could hear. Ethan turned to her. "Yes, since day one. She reminds me of a patient I once had. Everything perfect on the outside, but something's off underneath." At breakfast, Sloane appeared before everyone else. She wore a breezy linen dress and simple sandals, effortless, casual, curated. She made small talk with Ethan's mother, brought tea to Ryan's. Grandma laughed with the bridesmaids. The entire room seemed to orbit around her. But Grace noticed something. Sloane never stayed in one spot long. She drifted like a politician at a fundraiser, always moving, always managing. And each time she left the table, she had a different phone in hand. Blue case, red case, no case. It changed. Constantly. Most people didn't swap phone cases or phones 3 times a day. Later that morning, when Jeffrey, the wedding planner, approached Sloane about a minor seating adjustment, her tone flipped. "I don't pay you to bring me problems, Jeffrey. I pay you to solve them." Jeffrey looked stunned. But the moment she noticed Grace watching, her demeanor changed instantly. "I'm so sorry, Jeffrey," she said, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Pre-wedding stress. Just do what you think is best." Grace saw it clearly. Sloane could switch personas in seconds. That afternoon, Ethan quietly pulled Grace aside. "I asked a friend of mine from med school. He works private security now, to run a quick background check. Just the basics. Schoolwork history, Stanford MBA, LinkedIn. Anything that confirms who she is." Grace hesitated, then nodded. "If something's truly wrong, I'd rather know now." Later that day, during the wine tasting tour, Grace watched Sloane charm her father, Richard. They stood near the vineyard gate discussing international markets, renewable energy, and Chinese regulations. Sloane spoke like a seasoned analyst. "She didn't study finance," Grace murmured. "Not as far as we know," Ethan replied. But what made Grace's skin crawl was that Sloane brought up one of her father's proprietary investment models, something never published, never shared beyond close family. Grace leaned closer to Ethan. "You didn't tell her anything about Dad's strategies, did you?" "Never," Ethan said firmly. That evening, as the sunset bled into the hills, Ethan handed Grace his phone. On the screen was a scanned Massachusetts driver's license. The woman in the photo had darker hair and wore a harder expression, but the bone structure, the eyes, it was her. Sloane. Only the name said Erica Donovan. She was married to a hedge fund manager in Boston, Lawrence Peaton, Ethan explained quietly. Then she vanished. Took nearly $2 million from their joint accounts and disappeared. She used that identity, and others. Grace stared at the screen, her stomach twisting into knots. This wasn't a quirky new bride. She was a professional con artist. On the morning of the wedding, the Sonoma sky looked like something out of a painting, clear, golden, and impossibly serene. Grace stood at her window watching the staff arrange rows of white chairs beneath a flower-draped wooden archway. The sunlight filtered softly through the vineyard vines, bathing everything in a golden haze. It should have felt like peace, but it didn't. Last night's revelations still echoed in her mind. She couldn't unsee the driver's license, couldn't ignore the name Erica Donovan. But today wasn't about her. It was Ryan's wedding day, and she needed to stay composed for him. In the bridal suite, Grace found Sloane surrounded by a team of stylists and bridesmaids, yet she radiated a stillness that felt almost unnatural. She sat like a portrait, graceful, serene, untouched by stress. Grace Sloane called when she saw her. "Come sit next to me. I have something for you." She motioned toward a small velvet box on the vanity. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a single pearl charm. "Just a little thank you," Sloane said, meeting Grace's eyes through the mirror. "Ryan says you're the one he trusts the most. Your acceptance means everything." Grace smiled, touched by the gesture despite herself. The words were perfect. The moment, too perfect. Still, it softened her doubt, if only for a second. The ceremony was flawless. Ryan looked dashing in a deep navy tux, standing nervously beneath the rose arch. Then came Sloane arm in arm with her father, walking the aisle in a stunning designer gown. Guests gasped. Phones clicked. Ryan's eyes filled with tears. The vows were poetic. Sloane's voice broke at all the right moments. Ryan stumbled adorably. They exchanged rings. Guests cheered. Champagne flowed. But Grace noticed things others didn't. The way Sloane scanned the crowd, assessing reactions. The way she paused just long enough between lines as if she had practiced. The entire day felt directed. At the reception, Sloane floated through the venue like a celebrity host. She toasted with Ryan's friends, poured wine for Grace's parents, and introduced older men from her side of the family to Richard, Grace's father. And Grace noticed something else. No one from Sloane's supposed family acted like family. Chloe, the cousin, hovered at a distance. An older couple introduced as her aunt and uncle sat quietly contributing little. No Stanford friends. No childhood besties. It was all hollow. Ethan leaned in during their slow dance. "Have you noticed her accent shifts with your dad? It's breezy West Coast. With her father, it's almost New York sharp." Grace nodded. "She's adjusting, like a mirror." As the night wore on, Grace caught Ethan snapping pictures of Sloane interacting with different groups, exchanging glances, laughing at just the right volume. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Cataloging. We'll need faces, interactions, evidence." Grace followed his gaze. Sloane was seated beside her father, laughing easily as he discussed investment strategies with a man she claimed was her own father. The laughter was perfect. The lighting was perfect. Everything too perfect. And Grace. She felt the first chill of something deep, calculated, and cold moving underneath it all. The morning sun filtered softly through the garden as the post-wedding brunch got underway. Guests arrived slowly recovering from the night before, sipping on Bloody Marys and mimosas. Laughter floated on the breeze. At the head table, Ryan and Sloane sat hand in hand, glowing, accepting congratulations with effortless charm. To anyone watching, they were the dream couple. But Grace knew better. Ethan hadn't touched his food. He kept glancing at his phone occasionally, stepping away to take calls, odd for someone who usually made it a point to unplug on vacations. When Grace asked, he muttered something vague about the hospital, but she wasn't convinced. They rejoined her parents at the family table. Margaret beamed as she watched her new daughter-in-law chatting with the guests. "She's just wonderful, isn't she?" Margaret said. "So polished, so poised." "Ryan's lucky," Richard, more measured, added, "and her father Robert, he's impressive. We had a very productive conversation last night." Grace looked over. "You're actually thinking of investing with him?" Richard gave a small shrug. "He's got serious connections in Asian markets. Combine that with my energy portfolio, and we could do something groundbreaking." Before Grace could respond, Ethan's phone buzzed again. He excused himself, stepping out once more. When he returned, his expression had changed. Grim. Set. Just then, Sloane approached their table, smile in place, hand lightly resting on Richard's shoulder. "I wanted to ask your thoughts on the Sherman portfolio," she said sweetly. "I've heard you've had remarkable success with asset allocation in that strategy." Grace's head snapped toward her father. The Sherman strategy was confidential. A proprietary model Richard had built over decades. It was never shared outside their immediate circle. How did she know? When Sloane walked away, Ethan leaned in, close, voice low and urgent. "We need to leave, now." Grace blinked. "What, why?" Ethan didn't take his eyes off Sloane now, laughing with one of the older guests. "It's not the hospital, it's her." "Sloane." Grace's breath caught. "What are you saying?" Ethan's voice was barely audible. "She's not who she says she is. Your brother didn't marry a woman named Sloane Whitaker. He married a professional con artist. And Ryan wasn't the target." Grace stared at him, heart pounding. "She's after your dad, Grace. That's what this was always about." 15 minutes after Ethan whispered, "We need to leave," Grace sat frozen in the back seat of their rental car, staring blankly out the window as the Sonoma estate disappeared behind them. Ethan drove with silent urgency, his grip on the wheel tight, jaw clenched. Grace's thoughts, however, were anything but quiet. "Tell me everything she said, now." Ethan turned off onto a secluded road, overlooking the vineyards, parking at a scenic pullout. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone, opening a folder titled simply Whitaker. Urgent. Photos, documents, news articles, FBI bulletins. "She's not Sloane Whitaker," Ethan said, voice low and steady. "Her real name is Alexandra Novak. She's been using aliases for years, Erica Donovan, Catherine Miller, all tied to elaborate cons." He handed Grace the phone. On the screen, a Massachusetts driver's license, Erica Donovan. The face was familiar, though the hair color and styling were different. It was her. No doubt. 3 years ago, she married a hedge fund manager in Boston, Lawrence Peaton, Ethan explained. She gained access to his clients, their money, and vanished with nearly $2 million. He swiped again. Another identity. Another man. Another financial wreckage. Grace felt her stomach twist. Her chest tightened. The weight of it all was crushing. This wasn't about Ryan, Ethan continued. It was never about Ryan. It was about your father. Ryan was just the easiest way in. Grace shook her head slowly. "How do you know for sure?" "Because of what she knew, your dad's Sherman model internal company projections proprietary data. No one outside your family could know that unless they had access." He paused. "And they did." "I had my friend in private cybersecurity check. He confirmed it. Someone installed a keylogger on your dad's laptop 3 days ago, right after you all arrived." Grace covered her mouth in disbelief. She's been recording everything, passwords, financial data, even emails. How she whispered. Your dad was showing her father some files, Ethan said. My guess? That's when she slipped it in. Small USB device, or even a Bluetooth dropper. She's done this before. Everything clicked at once. The multiple phones, the shifting accents, the way she guided conversations toward business. The fake family. She played all of us, Grace said, voice thick. Ethan nodded. But she hasn't won. Not yet. Grace looked up, eyes blazing. We tell Ryan. Today. We will, Ethan said. But carefully. If she suspects anything too soon, she'll disappear. That's what she's always done. That's why no one's caught her. He started the car. We go back. And we end this. Together. Back in a quiet wooded part of town near Sonoma, Grace, and Ethan checked into a modest hotel tucked behind a line of cypress trees. The weekend no longer felt like a wedding celebration. It had transformed into a crisis. A mission. Ethan worked the room like a command center, calling contacts, scanning files, comparing photos. His laptop was a battlefield, tabs open like blueprints for an operation. He reached out to his friend in cybersecurity, the one who confirmed that Richard's laptop had been compromised. Meanwhile, Grace called Jen, her college roommate turned tech specialist, who owed Richard for helping her get her first job years ago. Jen, I need a favor. A big one, Grace said, pacing. I need you to scan my dad's system. Someone's been accessing his files, and it's serious. Jen was hesitant. What Grace was asking bordered on illegal, but when she heard just enough of the situation, she replied simply, send me the access credentials. I'm on it. Grace called her father and told him Ethan needed examples of investment strategies for a medical colleague. Richard, ever proud of his work, shared login details without a second thought. 2 hours later, Jen called back. There's definitely a keylogger. Installed 3 days ago. It's been recording everything, keystrokes, login data, even secure email drafts. Grace's blood ran cold. Can you trace the device? It was connected via the same Wi-Fi network as your dad, so whoever installed it was physically there. Grace relayed the information to Ethan, who immediately contacted a financial crimes division at the FBI. After cross-checking, they confirmed Alexandra Novak, aka Sloan Whitaker, was already flagged in at least 3 open investigations in different states, but no victim had pressed formal charges until now. This might be our only window to stop her, Ethan said. She could pull money at any moment, Grace replied. We go back. Tonight. There was no more doubt. No more room for hesitation. They packed silently and drove back toward the estate, arriving just as the rehearsal dinner crowd began to thin. Grace sent Ryan a message, need to talk. Urgent. About Sloan. Library. Please. Ryan agreed. He walked in 10 minutes later, his expression tense. What's going on? Why did you two leave without a word? Grace inhaled deeply. We're going to tell you everything. But we need you to stay calm and let us show you. Ethan opened his laptop. One by one, the files appeared, driver's licenses under different names, marriage certificates, news articles, FBI notices, and the forensic report on Richard's compromised system. Ryan's face went from confused to pale to horrified. This can't be real. She's the woman I married. She's a professional, Ethan said gently. She didn't choose you, Ryan. She targeted your father. You were the way in. Ryan collapsed into a chair, burying his face in his hands. We're going to stop her, Grace said firmly. But we need you with us. Tonight we confront her. No more running. Ryan sat in the library staring at the screen filled with images of Sloan under 3 different names, Erica Donovan, Catherine Miller, Alexandra Novak. Each file was a wrecking ball to his memory. Every sweet moment, every whispered, I love you, every laugh they shared, it all felt like scenes in a script she'd performed flawlessly. Ethan and Grace remained silent, seated across from him. They knew Ryan needed space to absorb, Space to break. Finally, he looked up, his voice strained but firm. "I want to be the one to confront her." "No," Grace said instantly. "She manipulates people for a living. You have no idea what she's capable of." "That's exactly why it has to be me. If even a sliver of it was real, I need to hear it from her." Ethan interjected, calm but resolute. "We'll be there. You're not doing this alone." They debated it for several minutes before agreeing on a plan. Ryan would confront her directly, but Grace, Ethan, and their parents would be present. They messaged Sloane to meet in the family suite, citing a family matter. Margaret was also called in, but not yet told the truth. They needed her calm. The atmosphere was tense like the moment before a courtroom verdict. When Sloane walked in, the room fell silent. She wore jeans and a beige sweater, hair tied back casually, face glowing with the ease of a newlywed entering a harmless family chat. Her smile faltered slightly at the heavy mood. "What's going on? I heard it was urgent." Ryan stood. He was no longer the love-struck groom. His voice was cold, controlled. "We know Alexandra, or do you prefer Erica?" Sloane froze, just for a second. But in her eyes there was a flicker. Not fear, calculation. She was scanning for escape. "Ryan, I don't know what you're talking about." Ethan opened the laptop. Images appeared on screen IDs, marriage records, FBI reports. "We have everything he said. Your aliases, the men you've conned, the money you stole." Sloane took a step back. Her eyes flicked to the door. She wasn't afraid she was plotting. "This is insane. None of that is real." Richard stood then, his voice sharp. "And the spyware on my computer, the financial data that was being recorded, was that fake too?" Sloane's mouth tightened. Then her posture shifted. Her accent, once California smooth, now bore a subtle Eastern edge. Colder. Foreign. "You're smarter than I gave you credit for," she said, locking eyes with Ethan. "Especially you, Doctor. I underestimated you." Margaret gasped. Ryan physically recoiled as though struck. "So, none of it was real," he choked. Alexandra tilted her head. "I didn't dislike you, Ryan. You're kind, trusting, simple. I enjoyed that. But this was business, and I'm good at it." Silence fell. "You're not going anywhere," Ethan said, pulling out his phone. "The FBI's already been alerted. Every account connected to you is frozen." For the first time, Alexandra's face lost color. The room felt smaller now, tighter, tenser, as the truth hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Alexandra, whatever her real name was, stood before the Reynolds family, stripped of the charm and elegance she had worn like armor all weekend. Her smile was gone. Her eyes, once warm and inviting, were now ice. "What were you planning to do next?" Richard asked. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight. Alexandra crossed her arms and gave a small mocking smile. "Next. Looks like you've already made that decision for me. FBI frozen accounts, full-scale panic. Very efficient." "Because you're a criminal," Ethan said evenly. "And if we hadn't stopped you, you would have taken everything." She let out a dry laugh. "You really think I did all this alone?" she said. "You think I'm the only player in this game? That's adorable." Grace stiffened. "Who else?" "The fake relatives. The man pretending to be your father." "Where are they now?" Alexandra shrugged. "Gone, as always. We split after the main event. I'm the face, but they're the ones pulling strings." And my brother, Grace asked, voice cracking with emotion. Was he part of the event too? Alexandra didn't blink. Ryan was the access point. Your father was the prize. Ryan lowered his head. Margaret put a gentle hand on his shoulder, steadying him. Richard's jaw tightened. "Don't you feel any guilt?" Alexandra gave a sharp laugh. "Guilt, I call it redistribution. You people have more than you could ever need. I just evened the scales. By lying, by destroying lives," Grace shot back. "Better than sitting quietly in a world built on privilege," Alexandra replied coldly. "I built my life, no one handed it to me." Silence settled over the room like a heavy fog. Ethan checked his watch. "FBI will be here in 30 minutes. Alexandra straightened, scanning the room one last time. Well, she said calmly, I guess the game's over. But don't get too comfortable. You haven't really won. You don't get to hurt anyone else, Grace said, her voice hard as steel. Alexandra gave one last smile, but this one lacked bravado. It was final. A quiet surrender. No one moved. No one spoke. Alexandra stood at the center of the room alone in her unraveling act. Her once effortless charm had evaporated, leaving behind a woman stripped down to cold calculation. And yet even now she didn't flinch. Her back was straight. Her eyes gleamed with the kind of arrogance that had fooled so many. I won't be convicted, she said evenly. At least not the way you think. Ethan crossed his arms. You really think you're walking out of here? She gave a quiet laugh. I haven't taken anything. No funds have been withdrawn. It's all circumstantial. Paranoia. Richard's jaw tightened. You planted spyware on my computer. You accessed confidential financial data. You think the FBI needs you to hit withdraw before they act. Alexandra's tone stayed level. Even if you press charges, a public trial will do more damage to you than to me. Headlines will read, Respected investor duped by fake bride. How long do you think your reputation will survive that? Grace gave a short, sharp laugh. You really believe we care more about our image than stopping you from conning someone else? Alexandra said nothing. She turned to Ryan, still sitting motionless, eyes locked on some unseen distance. You know, she said softly, we could have had a good life. I didn't fake everything. I did enjoy being with you. Ryan didn't look up. His voice was hoarse. None of it was real. You don't exist. Something flickered across Alexandra's face. Not regret, more like a hairline crack in the polished mask she wore so well. She was used to control, to influence. But now she had none. You misread us, Grace said. This entire family. And you misread what we're capable of doing next, Ethan added, stepping forward. Alexandra opened her mouth as if to deliver one last clever retort, but was cut off by a loud, unmistakable knock at the door. FBI. The final mask dropped from her face. There was no charm, no smirk, just the hollow realization that the game was over. The FBI arrived within minutes of the knock. 2 agents dressed in crisp suits and carrying authority in every step entered the room. Their faces were unreadable. Their warrant was not. Alexandra stood still. She didn't scream. She didn't protest. She simply let out a long, exhausted breath, as if for the first time she realized the game was truly over. Grace watched in silence. The woman who had just 24 hours earlier embodied elegance and poise was now being handcuffed like a nameless scam artist, led through the hallway of the estate in front of the very people she had deceived. Ryan said nothing. His eyes never left Alexandra, but there was no rage. No tears, just emptiness. You okay, Grace asked softly, placing a hand on his shoulder. He nodded but didn't speak. His gaze lingered on the space where she had stood, as if still trying to reconcile who she had been with, what she truly was. As the agents escorted Alexandra down the corridor, a few remaining guests caught glimpses from the lounge. Whispers followed, confused glances exchanged. No one outside the family knew the full story, only that the bride had hidden her past and the marriage would be annulled. That was the polite version, but the Reynolds family knew better. They had come dangerously close to losing everything: their reputation, their finances, their trust, if not for Ethan's instincts and Grace's refusal to ignore what didn't feel right. In the days that followed, the FBI confirmed that Alexandra Novak was indeed an international con artist. She had used multiple aliases to marry and defraud wealthy men across 3 states, stealing over $8 million in total. Her family was a crew of imposters, hired actors, skilled manipulators, including the man who played her father, a fugitive wanted in 2 states for similar schemes. Richard, a man known for keeping his cool during the most high-stakes investments, admitted that he had never felt more exposed. Margaret's only focus was Ryan protecting him not just physically but emotionally. Days later, the estate stood quiet. The florals had wilted. The arch had been taken down. Grace and Ethan stayed behind to help the family pack and reset. Ryan had no intention of returning to his apartment in San Francisco. "It's just empty now," he said. "Like that life I thought I had doesn't exist anymore. I'm going to stay in Chicago for a while. I need distance. I need to begin again." Grace squeezed his hand, and for the first time in days, she smiled with more than just sympathy. "Her downfall isn't your own," she said. A year had passed since the scandal, and no one in the Reynolds family mentioned the name Sloan Whitaker anymore. Not because they had forgotten, but because they had learned not to let a fraud cast a shadow over everything that still mattered. Ryan now lived in Chicago, just a few blocks from his parents. He worked at a local tech firm, but more importantly, he spent his evenings helping with community-based education programs, something he'd always wanted to do but never had the drive. Now, after everything, he was rebuilding from the inside out, grounded in kindness, truth, and quiet gratitude. Grace and Ethan kept their Sunday evening ritual, calling Ryan each week. Sometimes the conversations were long and lighthearted. Other times, they simply sat in silence, sharing space even across the phone line. No explanations needed. Just presence. Richard had grown more cautious with every investment. He hired a cybersecurity team to rework his firm's systems, and for the first time in decades, started sharing decision-making with Margaret and Grace, something he used to think was unnecessary. Margaret, in her graceful way, became the family's emotional anchor. She hosted monthly dinners, invited old friends, and gently introduced Ryan to new connections. She made sure he never healed alone. As for Alexandra Novak, she was being prosecuted in 3 states with overwhelming evidence. She now faced up to 30 years in prison. But for the Reynolds family, the sentence wasn't the point. What mattered most was that they hadn't lost each other. One cool autumn evening, the family sat around the dinner table again. No wedding toasts, no roses, no luxury wine. Just Margaret's homemade stew, familiar laughter, and Ryan's eyes clearer now than they'd been in a long time. "It's strange," he said near the end of the meal. "I thought betrayal would make me incapable of trusting anyone again. But somehow, the heartbreak showed me what real love looks like." Grace nodded, her eyes misty. Ethan reached for her hand beneath the table. Not everyone finds their way back after being broken, but Ryan had by choosing not to lose faith in the people who never left.